Hey, good afternoon. Scott Luton, Greg White, and Kevin L. Jackson with you here today on
Hello.
Supply Chain Now. How we doing, Kevin and Greg?
Hey, it's the equinox, right? It's springtime.
It is.
Woo-hoo!
Yes. Yes, March 20th is the day of Vernal Equinox. And I have to say, I'm a bit surprised because I knew Vernal as a kid and I never thought he'd turn out to be much of anything.
I bet they always got his name wrong in school on the first day of
Yeah.
class, too, huh?
That's an old Bartles and James commercial. Since hard seltzers are so popular right now, literally, I've gotten 3 pitches for hard seltzers from companies seeking investment in the last week. They're so
Wow.
Yeah, it reminds me of wine coolers, Kevin. Remember the 80s? Is that when wine coolers were popular?
Let's go with it.
Let's
Boone's
go with
Farm.
80s.
What's that?
What's that?
Ooh, what is Boone's Farm?
Boone's Farm. That's like really classy wine. That was good. Whenever I saw somebody drinking Boone's Farm, I thought they lived at the liquor store because they were usually sitting outside drinking it.
Only.
So did you get your hour back yet? I'm still trying.
Oh, man, it is hard on you. It is hard on you, isn't it?
Yeah, jeez.
So, gentlemen, today, as always, Mondays at 12 noon Eastern time is the Supply Chain Buzz. And Greg and I are joined today with host of, the list would be 18 pages long if we really properly introduce
Everything.
Kevin L. Jackson.
No,
I don't have enough time in the show.
But most related, he's host of our Digital Transformers series, which has been launched out of the gates. He's author of Click to Transform and so much more. So great to have Kevin, you on the buzz with us here today.
Oh, I'm excited.
We are too. So let's get down to work here real quick. We're going to say hello to a bunch of folks that have already tuned in here momentarily, but I want to knock out a couple of things. We got to pay the bills a little bit. So tomorrow, finally, it's here. We've been promoting this webinar for quite some time. Hundreds of folks have registered to join us. We're going to be talking Industry 4.0. Not that it's around the corner. It's been here for years. We're going to be getting from Mike and don't call it a comeback. That's right. From Mike and Tobias, we're going to be getting creative applications of Industry 4.0, especially in the manufacturing sector, especially in the automotive sector, which is one of Greg's favorite things to talk about. So looking forward to that tomorrow, an hour early, because we're catering a little bit to not just North American audience, but also the European audience. So we're going to go live tomorrow, Greg, at 11 a.m. Eastern time.
I'm glad you reminded me.
So you can register for this. We still have room. Here's a link in the show notes. You can join us there. Let's see. Today, Kevin, speaking of some programming notes, we dropped a great episode with AT&T Business today, right?
Oh, yeah. So we had Alex Jones on, and, he talks about digital acceleration. He's a assistant vice president for omni-channel at AT&T Business. All of the small and medium-sized businesses, over 99% of all businesses in the United States meet that category. And he's talking about how companies need to actually rebound from that horrible year we had last year. And he's talking about how technology enables digital acceleration, right? And it's a fascinating. I'm thinking, I loved it so much. I'm thinking about changing the name of the show.
Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones. I think that's the song somewhere. All right, so Greg, Kevin just mentioned that using technology to accelerate growth and accelerating change and to go meet the customers and meet their demands these days. Any quick commentary on that?
Well, I mean, I think that's something that, we've been talking about since this seismic societal disruption started. And, I think the general theme we have stated is if you built your house on sand and you have somehow survived the flood of that year, which I noticed Kevin also refuses to name, that year that happened prior to 2021, and you somehow managed to survive that flood, don't be foolish enough to do that again. So, yeah, I mean, I think companies have to be thinking about this, and they clearly are. I can tell you that there are a lot of solution providers out there thinking about it. I hear from literally 3 a day. And there are a lot of companies seeking to solve these problems, as we know when we talk to so many of the chief supply chain and chief procurement officers out there.
Well said. Lots of interest, and it was a pleasure to sit down with Kevin and Alex on this episode. And see, today in the This Week in Business History channel, part of Supply Chain Now programming, we talked about Stuckey's and their magical pecan log roll. Stuckey's been around for 80 years, and the anniversary this week was a birthday of their founder, W.S. Stuckey. They grew to 350 locations by the 70s, and then had a corporate. They sold out to a corporate company, and unfortunately, the company was not one that really. That company was acquired, and then that company was acquired, and before you knew it, the core of the business that really served these travelers had been ignored, and they crashed a bit. Well, now Stephanie Stuckey, the granddaughter of the founder, has repurchased the organization, and she is, as Greg, you and Kevin both know, because we've had her here with us on the Buzz.
She was on the show, yeah.
They're on the comeback trail, and so it was really neat to dive into that story. And Greg and Kevin, there's 2 stories to focus on: Stuckey's, but also the second one was what is the connection between liquid paper, the monkeys, and MTV? So what an interesting trio, huh? So tune in to This Week in Business History to learn a lot more. All right. Here's a little surprise. So we got a snapshot this morning, as a matter of fact, and Peter Bollet, I think you're here with us already. So this was neat. We were just talking about cars last week. Greg is our car automotive aficionado, if I said that word right. And we'll go with it. Peter Bollet, one of our favorite community members here, always chimes in with great expertise. He sent us a picture of him and his friends, including his significant other, driving in his 2012 3.7 liter, 310 horsepower Ford Mustang convertible. You can just see it on the far end there. And the one in the bottom left-hand corner is not his car, but I Googled based on the specs he shared, just so y'all can get a closer look. Greg probably has the engineering specs for this vehicle, I imagine, even though his favorite, Greg, is a 1967 Ford Mustang.
Yes, Shelby GT500.
Shelby. Oh, yeah.
So,
well, it's interesting because Peter's got a little nod to Shelby American with those 2 stripes on the driver's side fender. That is a trait of Shelby American and a couple of their drivers when they drove Cobras, Shelby Cobras, while racing.
I want you to, Greg, we need a new automotive focused podcast with the one and only Greg White. You could do that in your sleep, but we'll save that for another day. But in the meantime, more importantly, hey, to folks that join us on these live streams, we'd love to give us some snapshots of how you're kind of unplugging and stepping back from all the noise, and do it this way. Drop it in our LinkedIn group, Insiders group community, or we're talking about, not just yet, we're talking about maybe creating a Slack channel for our community members that can jump in and kind of further their relationships and share information and whatnot. So, but the easy one right now is join our LinkedIn Insiders group and share that way. But this is really cool, Peter.
Supply Chain Now Insiders. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for sharing as well. Okay. So for a second here, before we jump into, we've got 4 stories I think we're gonna jump into, Greg and Kevin. Before we do, I want to say hello to a few folks, but give us one, Greg, we'll start with you. Give us one highlight from the weekend. And Greg, you don't have to share what may be folks tuned in last Thursday. What's one highlight?
One highlight from the weekend, I got to spend it with all of my daughters and all of their respective significant others, including one we hope is on the comeback trail. So our youngest there may be a, what do you call that? Reconciliation.
Trying to find the right words, huh?
In the works. And yes, and I can tell you that the other 2 significant others are, they're feared because he was number 1 before the split. So there's a threat to number 1 right now. No. You know what? I'll tell you, one of the other things is of course, March Madness. It was a tragic end for Wichita State. They were pathetically unprepared, and I mean, there's no other way to say it, and probably overlooked this team. But what an incredible weekend, man. Some amazing. Oral Roberts beat 2 amazing basketball teams this weekend. Just basketball.
It was that prayer tower they have on that campus that clearly gave them the edge.
Been there, as a matter of fact. Wichita State plays Oral Roberts quite a bit because they're right there in Oklahoma. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, Greg, wonderful weekend, and I know that just scrapes the tip of the iceberg. But comeback clearly is going to be our.
That's all I am allowed to announce.
So, Kevin, give us some good news. What was one of your favorite things over the weekend?
So, to be honest, over the weekend was sort of a binge watch weekend for me.
Good. I feel better knowing that you binge watch ever, Kevin, with everything you've got on your plate.
Oh, just sitting in front of Netflix all weekend. That's probably a big mistake because, like this Thursday, we're doing a national virtual expo with my online B2B business, Source Connect. We're going to be coast to coast online. And doing a webinar on Thursday also about is your company ready to take Bitcoin? And that's the other thing. Bitcoin went up to 60K.
Wow.
One Bitcoin worth 60,000. So it pulled back a little bit. But, business really needs to be ready for this transition to digital. Okay, it's a big thing.
I'm with you. Clay and Amanda, if we can drop the link to that event, the Source Connect event, in the comments, that'd be wonderful. We should grab that ahead of time. It's my bad there, Kevin. We've been promoting that a little bit across social, but sounds like a great opportunity for folks to get up to speed on a variety of different
it's
things
free,
related to digital.
Free registration. It's about over 2,000 people registered already.
Outstanding. So let's drop that link. And moving right along, let's say hello to a few folks here. So of course, Peter is with us. He is the owner, the happy owner of that very fast Mustang we shared a little while ago. Mm-hmm. And clearly it looks like the weather might be nice up in Montreal. Jeffrey Miller, one of the smartest folks we know, Greg and Kevin. In fact, I think the three of y'all could really, Greg, Kevin, and Jeffrey, I think y'all could solve world hunger and peace in the Middle East and everything else. We can get three of y'all together sometime. But hope this finds you well, Jeffrey. Simon, love Simon's sense of humor. Great to have you here via LinkedIn. Catherine McCleary, talk about a digital transformer and a digital content factory. Wow. Catherine's got a lot of great stuff over at the Una Group, right, Greg?
Yeah, and she's going to need some advanced technology to break down the Chiefs roster because we are making a ton of roster moves in the off season. So, Catherine, whatever you can do there to help KC make sense of this new roster, I would sure appreciate it.
Love it. We'll break it down. Maybe on the Supply Chain Geeks Talk Sports episode.
There you go.
Kevin from Kenya, Nairobi. Great to have you here via LinkedIn. Welcome. T-Squared is with us, who holds down the fort on YouTube. We actually saw, I think, the gentleman behind T-Squared last week. Seagram's and Sundance, anyone?
That's the wine cooler. Yeah, he's there.
Dr. Rhonda Bompinza Zimmerman is with us. Great to see you here, Rhonda. Sheldon Rose via LinkedIn. Gary Smith. Gaurav, if I said that correctly. Hopefully, if I didn't, I apologize. Welcome from India. Let's see. Jeff Talbot is with us from San Francisco. Kind of early this morning. And finally, AA, good morning from Wichita State, Shockerland. And there's lots of references. There's lots of references to all the upsets. Okay. So I know we couldn't get to everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Supply Chain Buzz. So Greg and Kevin, are y'all ready to dive in?
Big news.
Let's do it. I want to, let's see if I press the right button. So this was kind of neat. So this is the first story we're going to tackle briefly here today. We're talking trade. We've got a new U.S. trade representative in Catherine Tai. And a couple of observations, I tell you, in an article like this was one of the deep dives from Supply Chain Dive. And if you want to really go to hard hitting news and analysis where they really, they do a great job getting to the root of the story, you can check out Supply Chain Dive, which is one of probably, Greg, 20 different aspects of the industry dive.
They have a ton of them. Yeah. But, for relevant to our industry are usually retail dive, supply chain dive, and like grocery dive talks a lot about, or food industry dive or something like that talks a lot about supply chain, obviously, because that's where the profit is made in the food industry.
Agreed. And their transportation dive just celebrated their 1-year anniversary today.
Also that one. Yeah. Sorry about that. That's
growing well. But this is a deep dive article by Shefali Kapadia, who we've covered here before, very talented writer, all about this new U.S. trade representative and a couple observations about trade policy we can expect. Some of these won't be surprises. Number one, expect more multilateralism. I think we all expected that. They don't see any expectation of the full removal of Section 301 tariffs in the short term, but more exclusions seems to be a priority Catherine Tai has. And then analysts say the Biden administration appears to be much more focused on foreign policy in particular rather than trade policy. So the big difference between the two recent White House occupants. So we'll see how that goes. I like this quote from the article. We've talked about this extensively, but Shefali really puts it well. Quote, the backdrop of COVID-19 puts trade in a different lens for policymakers. The pandemic shed light on the United States' over-reliance on foreign nations for critical goods, such as pharmaceuticals and personal protective equipment. It made clear that trade policy and supply chain risk management are intertwined, end quote. So, Greg, let's go with you first. A couple of thoughts on trade and maybe how the new administration is going to tackle this, especially with China.
Well, I think it would be impossible to be less lenient with China than we are today. I can't tell you, frankly, I'm not enough of a trade expert to know whether that is prudent or not. If anything, if COVID-19 has taught us anything, it is that, to put it mildly, China is not our friend, and that they will use trade as a hammer against us. So hopefully these are prudent and not what should I say?
Rash? Or
I wasn't going to say rash. I was going to say more like window dressing, right? Not for optics. We've seen a lot of moves in this new administration, some of which are very prudent, some of which are optics, some of which are a representation of the prior administration's policies, some of which exists in the recent executive order on supply chain. So I'm just hopeful that there is substance here and that it's, as you said, prudent and well thought out.
Yeah. Greg, I'm sorry, Kevin.
Well, I was looking at a show before I started binge watching, by the way. They were talking about how trade was being reset in the new administration. And it was really highlighted when the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, met with the Chinese counterpart up in Anchorage, Alaska. And it's kind of interesting. They called it, quote, an undiplomatic war of words between the two representatives, where Blinken said that China's actions could result in far more violent world, while Beijing accused the United States of mistreating Black Americans. I mean, I'm sitting right there looking at it, and it's like, wow, this is how the top diplomats from two countries that are supposed to be trading partners talking to one another.
Not really diplomatic.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So, you don't know how much of it is real, probably very little, and how much of it is theater, probably a whole lot of it was theater.
Well said.
It's still interesting.
We're going to build a trade show soon, Greg. We're going to have to, I know that Nadia Theodore, which is one of Canada's leading trade leaders here in the States. She's since moved into the private sector. Would love to have her back. And then there's a gentleman that I can't remember his name right this second, but he came and keynoted at the Georgia Logistics Summit. And the guy just, he and Nadia, could maybe so. The two of them would be two dynamos. We'll have to tee up a show. But really quick, a couple comments here. Azalea says, I hope the new trade chief speaks Chinese. And she does. She speaks Mandarin, Catherine Tai. And she and there was a lot of great compliments about her in the article. Aaron completely agrees with Greg about China. And Azalea, hopefully I'm not cutting you off too bad there, Kevin. Reading The Art of War can help one better understand China's trade tactics and motives. Great points there, Azalea. Okay. So a lot more to come. One last comment about this. In the article, it talked about how for better or for worse, and there's plenty of well-respected and educated opinions there, but it talked about how the Trump administration would move so fast, Greg, kind of to your point, and would make decisions and policy like overnight, and what other administrations would take 2 years and nuanced communication to kind of put in place. So again, for better or for worse, but we'll see how this works out in this very unique relationship between the U.S. and China.
Well, I think it's really important to understand your trading partners, and honor and respect are very important in all Asian cultures. And we didn't show any of that. I mean, regardless of what you think about the policies, we didn't show any of that honor or respect, and I'm sure that hindered the relationships pretty substantially.
Yeah, great point there, Greg. I can't get y'all's names right today. I want to combine it.
Okay, I can see why you'd confuse us. But Kevin may have done some binge watching this weekend also, Kevin.
Kevin, you had one other thing to add on Greg's comment there?
No, it's my twin. That's all.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get into reverse logistics, one of our favorite topics around here. We've got our upcoming reverse logistics series a week from, actually, this coming Friday.
Yeah, Friday,
featuring senior executive in supply chain from Best Buy. So tune in for that this Friday. But Kevin, let's talk about this story here. Talking about reverse logistics and last mile.
Right, absolutely. The online commerce is just huge, right? And the Digital Commerce 360 showed there was a study done, and that they said that consumers spent $861 billion online with retailers in 2020. That was up 44% from 2019. Not that something unusual happened in 2020 that kept everybody home on the shopping from Amazon, right? But Amazon hit almost 40% year over year growth. And in the holiday season, overall shopping jumped 45%. So companies are really reevaluating their supply chain operations for delivering these products, understandably, right? To try to keep pace on the rise of demand. But there's really a flip side of that, because it's a lot easier to buy. It's also a lot easier to return, right? So there's been a huge increase in e-commerce returns. And you may not really understand this or appreciate this, but $1 million in return can actually drop profit by over $500,000. So returns really hurt profit. So many merchandisers, many retailers basically say, don't return it, just keep it, because the cost of returning exceeds the value of the sale, right? But many companies really haven't thought about the importance of reverse logistics, so they don't have a plan in place. But that's really becoming critical as online sales. Reverse logistics supply requires about 20% more space and labor when compared to forward logistics. So you really need companies in the supply chain world really need to think about that and plan and identify how to take care of those returns.
Well said. All right. So, Greg, we can't be too far away from when you signal to a retailer that you want to return something. They're going to respond by asking you if you could check with your neighbors to see if they would like it.
Maybe. It's funny because we talked about returns a bit in our household this weekend. And I watched a return process just before we got on the show when my middle daughter, Delaney, was returning something to, I think, Lululemon or somebody like that. So I inquired, how the process worked and all that sort of thing for that particular retailer is really, really interesting. And it's funny because we talk about a lot of the solutions that are available, right, in this day and age. And I mean, just to put some perspective, I mean, the percentages are important, but I think it's important to recognize that retail sales and e-commerce went up from $600 million in 2019 to almost $900 million this year. So 900 billion, I'm sorry. Did I say million?
Yeah.
Sorry. $1 billion. So it is a significant leap in dollars, right? And what I'm seeing in the investment world so much is this incredible just addition of, sorry, Rhonda talked about, she sent me a note on LinkedIn. Sorry, I have to air this first. She sent me a note on LinkedIn and said, "You always seem so thoughtful and well prepared, and you measure your words very carefully." And I've never been able to say a word ever since she sent that to me. I keep thinking about, am I really that measured? But anyway, there's a lot of technology companies, particularly in Europe, because they have laws supporting this. In the States, we are well behind Europe because of that. But there is the existing reverse logistics space that Kevin talks about. And I was a retailer in an industry, the automotive industry, where we had a ton of returns. Some we expected, things called cores, where you buy a starter, you turn in your old starter, we have it remanufactured. And other returns that happened. And that was when we were selling 100% from stores. And it is incredibly inefficient. There are so many things to consider. Is the product still good? Is the product what you sold them? Or did they just put something else back in the box? Is the box any good? Right? Does the product need to be quality tested or refurbed, rehabbed, liquidated, whatever? Right. All of those things create all those complications that Kevin is talking about. But there are companies now who are really addressing this problem before or as the goods get back. But Scott, even to your point, how to disposition the good if you intend to return it. Some companies are exploring how to put goods that are sold strictly online into small businesses. And good Lord, don't we know that small businesses need a chance these days? Imagine if that ridiculous looking Louis Vuitton, sorry for any of you Louis Vuitton fans, that ridiculous looking Louis Vuitton bag that you bought, imagine if you could just take it to a local store that sells clothes and they could sell it rather than ship it back, right? And all kinds of solutions like that. So it's definitely in the forefront of companies' minds, of technologists' minds, of investors' minds. We're going to see billions flow in investment flow into the reverse logistics market over the next few years.
Agreed.
Well, something that I was surprised with, everyone's transitioning online, and the big malls, these anchor stores at malls are becoming empty, right? The malls are becoming empty. Well, for reverse logistics, it doesn't require the same level of functionality and sophistication as traditional distribution centers. So now they're converting abandoned mall anchor space into basic warehouse facilities for helping e-commerce returns. So the mall now is going to be a return center for e-commerce.
Hey, whatever it takes to reuse that property, because as we've talked about before, Greg, the malls are facing massive. They have been facing, and now on top of the further complicated by pandemics and survey after survey that says so many consumers are not going to return to malls. So I love to see that utilized different ways. I I want to share a couple of things. And by the way, Greg, as you were talking about stores, maybe both of y'all were talking about stores for returns. I had completely forgotten about back in the 80s when I was growing up, a store called Bums. And I don't know if it was local to the Augusta area, Aiken, South Carolina area, or if it was national, what have you. But they would offer high-end clothing that I couldn't afford when I was growing up that had holes or stains or something, lightly used stuff, but in person. Mm-hmm. And I think there's some different plays with some chains right now, but I don't think they offer maybe stuff as maybe beat up as this place did.
Oh, they do.
Do they? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't bought clothes in 12 years, Greg. I would not know, my friend.
You wear them out yourself, the good old fashioned way.
That's right. But hey, I'll share. We got a ton of comments around this really the first two topics. And then I want to start by saying this from David, because clearly LinkedIn is having some issues in recent weeks.
It is. I'm watching it over here, and I notice a lot of people are watching us from YouTube today. So maybe we could drop the links in for some of these other channels so folks can go to a technology company that's got their stuff together.
That's right. So, David, great to see you. And I agree with you. LinkedIn's got to get it figured out. But going back more to the reverse logistics, Gary says the returns process will be the undoing of many new e-tailers. Rhonda talking about our compliment to Greg. She really meant that. It was
I knew she meant it as a compliment. It's just, you know how you're sort of unaware of something and then you become aware of it and it's impossible to do. There was a second baseman for the Yankees who could not throw to first.
Steve Sass. No.
I think it's Knobloch. Knobloch.
Chuck Knobloch. Yes.
Knobloch. Yes.
Formerly with the Twins. He was with the Twins when they beat the Braves in '91, I believe. But that's a great call out, Greg. Very nice, man.
It's better. Chuck. Yeah, it's better to remain unconscious in your competence.
AA says reverse logistics is going to reshape the industry of 4.0 quite significantly. T squared, great to see T squared. Forward logistics shouldn't be on the pedestal for show. I agree. We're going to try to fit this one in. This might be a little big. Well, I'm going to paraphrase this a bit so we won't cut off Kevin there. So Rhonda was listening to Rick Roll podcast this weekend. He's not in the supply chain world, and he referenced e-commerce trends in the fitness and wellness world, which Rhonda is very active. If you follow her on socials, ton of hiking and stuff, and about how that's changed shopping habits. So Rhonda was thinking about all the ways you've talked about this here at Supply Chain Now. Right. He was concerned, Rick Roll, try to say that 5 times fast. He was concerned about waste and how the industry is addressing this. Also, something you all do an amazing job talking about and the need to address this issue. Rhonda, I didn't realize that was a big old compliment there, but thank you for sharing. Reverse logistics and waste and returns, huge opportunities that we're all speaking to, and one that to really continue to serve the e-commerce demand, no end in sight, we're going to have to get much, much better about as practitioners and organizations and leaders.
Yeah,
Jeff Miller.
I was just going to say, Scott, I can't tell you how much guilt I feel every time I put out the trash on Sunday night with all of the cardboard boxes that we have because of all the e-commerce shopping that we're doing. We have a bin the same size as our trash bin for recycling, right? But for some reason, I don't feel like I know that stuff is getting recycled or recycled properly, and at the same time, I think, isn't there a better way? And I was reading an article. See, I think forward logistics should be on the pedestal in this way in regard to returns. We need to think more about preventing returns or preventing waste, right? Or preventing,
the packaging itself is wasteful. There's too much.
What's that?
The packaging itself.
Yes. That's exactly what I was thinking, right? The box is too big, so it's full of other stuff that gets thrown away as well, right? But I saw someone who was talking about the automation of packaging last week, and imagine a scenario where your shipment gets a box built for it that is precisely the size of that order, right? With just enough packaging to make it safe and secure, and then the box ships. That's a possibility. We're not that far from that.
Imagine a scenario, Greg. That's what
in a world.
All right. Ton of comments here. We can't get to all of them. I want to share let's see. I'm gonna share this from Gary because he breaks out something we can all relate to, the good old J.C. Penney catalog. So he says, true. When I was a J.C. Penney catalog in the early 80s, we knew items would come back and had a pretty good returns policy. New e-tailers miss this entirely to their detriment.
There are technologies addressing that, Gary. Have faith. They just need to be a bit more universally adopted, right? Because Amazon doesn't really care that much about that for their sellers.
One final comment here, and we're going to move to Kevin. You got another story about farmer from returns to farming.
Yeah.
But Paula, and hope Paula finds you well in the Midwest, central part of the country. We sold refurb devices to our supplier, but sometimes they failed cosmetic or functional testing and needed to be returned for reimbursement. Reverse logistics squared. How about that?
Right.
The circular
keeps coming back.
Yeah.
Like a bad penny.
All right. So a lot of good stuff here. Kevin, I appreciate you sharing the Forbes article that chock full of POV and statistics that always reverse logistics and returns always gets the conversation going. So are we ready, Kevin? Final word before we move on to farmers.com.
We're going to go to farmers. All right.
So tell us about what's going on with Farmer Connect. Looks like they're doing some good things to land some new funding.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So Farmer Connect, it really is focused on helping technology improve the distribution and visibility of distribution of agricultural goods. But one of the biggest components of the Farmer Connect model is actually good old coffee. And they've actually secured like $9 million in Series A investment because their vision is to, quote, humanize consumption through technology, which is kind of weird, right? But what they really focused on is enabling traceable, sustainable, and efficient agricultural supply chains. So they want to directly connect the farmers to the consumers and everyone in between. So they're really doing what their name says. And the small holders and farmers really want to connect digitally to the agricultural supply chain. And they're leveraging blockchain technology to do that in order to ensure traceability and validation. And the reason this is important with respect to the money is because there is a huge demand for traceability when it comes to what's called ESG, which is environmental, social, and corporate governance, investing, as well as SDG investing, and that stands for Sustainable Development Goals. So they are actually getting these huge amounts of investment money because they are enabling this traceability, they're reducing the carbon footprint tracking, and they are automating tasks, reducing the cost. So this is critical. We're just talking about returns. Well, this is really reducing the environmental impact of us eating our food every day. So I think this is important. And they also have this Thank My Farmer app where the consumer, can trace the origin of their cereal in the morning or their burger that they're eating and trace the origins and the quality of the commodity. And it can even financially support the farmer by giving a donation to the farmer who actually grew the raw goods. So that visibility and seeing what you eat.
I love that. Any plans for tie-ins to farmersonly.com. Any word on that yet, Kevin? Maybe.
Yeah, no.
But,
I think those commercials are a joke. Every time I see them, I'm like, are they serious?
I'm serious with you, Greg. I'm with you, man. Hey, so Greg, weigh in here. I mean, you're our investment guru. I mean, how does your brain perceive this news that Kevin shared?
Well, I mean, I see companies like this every day. And Scott, what I think is really interesting is how this ties into some of the companies we talk about on Logistics with Purpose, right? Thrive Farmers, where they're trying to do right by the farmers, particularly in the coffee industry, as you both know, where they are extraordinarily disadvantaged and extraordinarily taken advantage of. They're making sure that the farmers get their fair share. This is another application that allows you to verify, whether it's fish or meat or vegetables or whatever, who caught it, cut it, or grew it, and the conditions under which it was grown and shipped and placed in the grocery and all those sorts of things, and connecting all of that so there's some accountability. I think this has the strong possibility to address a ton of things. Obviously, sustainability, fair trade, right? You guys know how I feel about fair trade and human rights, and let's call it what it is, slavery and things like that. So, the ability for the consumer to hold their suppliers, their brands accountable is really powerful, and it will allow us to finally do what we say we will do and rarely do. What is it? 40% of consumers say they'll choose suppliers based on their ESG policies, and only 10% actually do. So this will allow us some visibility to do those sorts of things. And also, it will help farmers reach the market more efficiently, which, if things keep going the way they are, the only farmer we're going to have in America is Bill Gates, who's buying up most of the farmland in America. So I'm sure this will help Bill somehow, and gosh, who needs it more than he does?
Let's share a couple of comments here from our audience and community members. Aaron, it's awesome. Anything to help our farmers is great. Kind of echoes some of the things that Kevin and Greg has shared. Rhonda agrees. Pretty cool. Gary, by the way, Gary, Greg has his pallet. It's not been lost. It's not been removed. It's right over his shoulder. Just for you. Pallet check-in. Gary Smith. So Gary says, hopefully this will also reduce food waste in the supply chain, which is as high as 30 to 40%. Great call out there, Gary. Food waste is such a huge challenge.
That's a whole nother level of the supply chain that we need to address. And we've talked to some companies who are doing that as well. Also a great cause.
Yes. Don't be good, be gooder, as I shamelessly stole Greg's line there. Gladstone, welcome to the live stream. I think this is the first time you've joined us here. He says the establishment of the visibility into the distribution of farm products through traceability and sustainability of the commodities to improve quality is the way to go. Great point there, Gladstone. Simon says we need standardized cross-industry measures of ethical, sustainable, moral supply chain, of being ACE to F being fail. Oh, A being ACE, F being fail. I got you. Sorry, Simon. It's Monday. My brain's moving slow.
Watch your lips.
Finally, AA, I wonder, can the blockchain trace the ingredient of the burger or hot dog? If so, how does this traceability affect sales? Great point.
Really good point. If people knew what went into hot dogs and bologna, they would never eat them again. Sausage also.
What about that impossible meat?
Ooh, that's a great point. That is a great point.
Have you ever eaten that stuff? I mean, it feels like it's mostly salt. I swell up like a balloon when I eat that stuff.
A couple more comments here. Big Show Bob Bova is with us. He's got a friend in the cardboard box business. The cost of cardboard has skyrocketed and on allocation, so please keep recycling. Sylvia in Charleston agreed. More quality, less returns. I just bought a Redland cotton duvet. Okay, sorry.
That's a comforter. Another word for comforter. kind of.
A duvet? That's how to say in Georgia, right?
Oh gosh, Sylvia, you can't use big words with me. Come on now.
No French.
She
No
says
French.
100% cotton made in Alabama. It came in a letter size envelope with no wasted packaging. I love those kinds of stories. We waste so much on packaging. And then Gary says, two things you never want to see made: sausage and legislation. Great point. All right.
Absolutely.
So
Truth.
we so great story here. A lot of great I love reverse logistics, Kevin, and of course farming. So two great stories. Appreciate you bringing it to the buzz here today. We are going to move on our final story, if it's okay here. Any final comment, Kevin, before we move forward on the farmers?
No. We've done a lot already.
Yeah, well, keep your eye on that industry. So I work with an incubator in Wichita, Kansas called Groover Labs, and obviously ag tech is big in the Midwest. So see a lot of companies coming through, organizations like that.
We got the perfect spokesperson. His first name is Bo, Greg. We're going to line him up for Groover Labs. It'd be a home run.
That's right.
All right. So let's move to our final story here today. This is neat. So Chris Barnes and I were up in Chicago a couple years back. And we were at a trade show with the APIX organization, which is now ASCM. Well, next door to that gathering where we did a remote broadcast, by the way, one of our first ones, was the association. Let me get this right. It was the Association for American Society of Civil Engineers. And they had a big gathering, and they had focused the gathering. One of the things they focused on was this infrastructure report they come out with every 3 or 4 years. And that's when it first hit my radar. I think we had a D- was our infrastructure grade back then, 3 or 4 years ago. Well, it's report card time again. And yes, your parents are going to have to sign this. We're all going to sign this one. It's not pretty for U.S. infrastructure, but there's a little bit of good news here. So again, the ASCE has released its latest report card on our infrastructure, and C- is this year's grade. So we've gotten a little bit better. In fact, it's the first time in 20 years that it has not been in the D range, either D-, D, or D+. So here's 3 key trends. There's a ton of information. It's very exhaustive research. You'll have to go to ASCE's website to get the whole thing. I looked at I reviewed the executive summary this morning, and 3 key takeaways that they really want to highlight from all the research. Number 1, maintenance backlogs are still a huge issue, but asset management best practices are helping to prioritize those maintenance activities. That's a great thing. Because if you've got limited resources, limited funding, and limited help and experts to fix stuff, you want to prioritize those resources for sure. State and local governments, number 2, have made progress. Get this: at least 25 major cities and states now have chief resilience officers. CR new version of CROs. Federal funding, in particular, has been increased for ports, drinking water, and inland waterways. But finally, the 3 big key, one of the final big takeaways from the research: there's still a huge data gap for various aspects of our national infrastructure, especially school facilities and levees. There's some 10,000 miles of levees where there's little to no data in terms of their well-being and soundness. So really interesting. They take a very holistic approach at evaluating infrastructure. Y'all can check that out. Maybe we can drop a link in the comments for everybody to consume. There's a ton of information. But let's start with you, Greg. Any we've talked about infrastructure quite a bit here today. Backbone of supply chains, how stuff moves. Any initial thoughts on your end?
Strangely, I saw a report on the Detroit Dam, which is strangely in Oregon, just above Salem, and the Army Corps of Engineers is lowering the water level in the lake from now until April because they've determined that if the gates are such that if an earthquake were to hit of a certain magnitude, that the gates would crumble and down comes the whole dam and buries Salem, Oregon, which is the capital city of Oregon. In case you didn't know that, I had forgotten it. And then, I constantly think about infrastructure. ASCE is the American Society of Civil Engineers. So these folks should know they are the ones responsible for maintaining this infrastructure. And this is a way that they can hold governments accountable, frankly, without losing their jobs, because sometimes infrastructure issues are ignored by government entities while they spend money on other things.
It's not visible, right? All those cracking concrete underneath the bridge that you're robbing on the top, you can't see.
When I moved,
get wet.
When I moved to Atlanta in 1995, should have said just over 2 decades ago, Atlanta was being fined $12,000 a day for dumping untreated waste into the Chattahoochee River.
Wow.
Hundreds of thousands, a lot of gallons a day. And I presume that they have cured that, because on the way to our studio, which I haven't driven to in a while, but on the way to our studio, I have to cross the bridge over the Chattahoochee where that plant exists. And let's just say the water looks a little bit clearer. So, these are things where cities and municipalities and counties and states have to be held accountable, because a lot of the work is not the federal government's. The federal government might provide the fundings for interstate highways, for instance, but the municipality is responsible for repairs and upgrades inside their limits.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And in all of these different levels, you've got different dynamics and politics and unfortunately waste. But at least we got a little good news in terms of how that third party, the ASCE, looks at it. Kevin,
that grade is up, so we're doing something, right? I feel a little bit like Tommy Boy. They don't like to give a lot of C minuses, but he passed.
Kevin, any thoughts on your end?
Well, infrastructure has really been crumbling across the entire United States. Bridges, tunnels, and there has been no money around locally. And then previous administrations had really, raped state and local when it comes to budget. And it's just gotten worse. And then, the year that will remain unnamed took a lot of money with respect to protecting us all from the virus. So I'm afraid infrastructure investment in infrastructure may actually get worse before it gets better. So that's really scary. But it's necessary. It's necessary.
Agreed. Got to keep stuff moving. And that's just one aspect of infrastructure. This really looks at, as I mentioned, schools and waterways and water, the pipe system for water and you name it. So y'all check that out. I think we've already dropped a link in the show notes, and let us know what your key takeaways are. A ton of information. Thanks to our friends over at ASCE for making the investment. Okay.
I'd be interested to understand what folks around the world perceive their infrastructure to look like, because in certain areas of the world, Germany is a great example. Theirs is stellar, and they continue to maintain it. So it can be done, right?
Yes. With famous Greg White-ism, with enough time and money, you can move mountains, right? All right. So let's look at a couple comments here. Chris Barnes, and ATL still has 3 of the top 10 most congested interstate interchanges in the USA. John Perry, who also said Steve Sachs had throwing issues, much like Chuck Knobloch, Greg, which I'm still impressed with, Greg. That was a nice pull. The one good thing to come from COVID is improvements to infrastructure, as John Perry says. Yeah, as in that year will not be named, as Kevin just shared. Aaron asked a great question I'm not sure of. Are the Army Corps of Engineers not involved with levees? Well, there's certainly, as we know,
they're involved.
dating. Yeah, they're definitely
I don't know if
involved.
it's good or bad, but they're involved.
Well, it depends too. It depends on, for instance, where most of the levees are in Louisiana. They maintain a lot of control over those levees, and I don't know if anybody knows anything about politics in Louisiana, but they make a banana republic look like a stellar democracy. So, like a lot of the control goes back to the local governments.
Well, Kevin, you know who we need? We need some Air Force engineers taking care of these levees, right?
Anyone but the Army.
That's right.
Right. I forgot. Okay, sorry. I wasn't going where you guys were going. I didn't realize. Yeah, I didn't realize where you guys were going there. I get it.
Well, and just sidebar, Kevin is our formal, amongst other things, former naval aviator. I was just a lowly data analyst in our Air Force, but a little bit of inter-service rivalry. And Greg is our retired. He does not admit it, will not admit it. CIA undercover world global secret agent officer. But anyway, double secret.
We'll tell you more about that, but we'd have to kill you.
Yes. Shandon, thanks for this today. It says wonderful session today. Supply chain management should be well synchronized with international trade policy. Shandon, excellent point. And kind of pointing back to that Supply Chain Dive article, clearly that's one key takeaway from the year that will not be named. Folks really had an awakening in terms of how policy can really showcase their resilience or fragility. Let's see here. Aaron says it certainly seems that Pennsylvania's infrastructure is getting better since we're always seeing
grab that one.
always seeing orange on the roads. Hey, oh gosh.
Isn't that the truth?
Now,
stuck in that traffic jam, I imagine.
Oh gosh, plenty here. Rhonda says had a train track here in Tempe, Arizona go down about 6 months ago. Impacts the supply chain. Obviously, this track had reportedly had issues before. Took a major accident happened, and just now, they're redoing the entire railway in that location. Unfortunately, gosh, what were we watching? It might have been World War II in color, which is a really neat series on Netflix, and we were revisiting the Pearl Harbor and all the warnings that were ignored until the disaster lay before the military. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, all too often, until it really bites you, leadership can ignore all the warning signs. It sounds like that may have been in play there in Tempe, Arizona. Okay. Well, as much fun as I'm having with Greg and Kevin, Greg, you and I always have a wonderful time covering the news and interacting and hearing from all of our folks in the comments. Kevin has been a little spice of life inserted into our buzz today.
I love it when we get these additional perspectives. Kevin, we get to hear from you all the time, but the audience does not. So I really appreciate you joining us.
But you're always turning the volume down, so I was wondering.
No, I'm muting me, not muting you.
Well, before we wrap, I want to share with everybody by now, whether it's Tequila Sunrise or Digital Transformers or connecting just with our hosts and our all of our programming, you can go to supplychainnow.com, where we're working really hard to serve as the voice of global supply chain. So now that we've done all the heavy lifting, I want to put Greg and Kevin, get y'all both away in here briefly as we wrap. Greg, what is next for Tequila Sunrise?
Yeah, next we're going to release an episode where I'm going to make some connections between companies and Generation Z. So you're going to get six.
Wow.
6. I wish I could do that on one hand. You're going to get 6 tips, 3 from me and 3 from an actual member of Gen Z, my middle daughter, Delaney Sue White, and talk about what her job experience has been, and it's really been stellar. The company she works for, which I will not announce here, but you'll get to see it, has done a great job of creating mentorship and a higher purpose and all those sorts of things. Anyway, I've given away 2 of the 6 already, but listen up, because it's a great discussion, and we did it in person, Scott Luton, because she's here with us. We did an actual video episode in person, sitting in two of our favorite chairs in the house here.
Love it. And I didn't know until you just let the cat out of the bag. Delaney Sue. Sue is her middle name. Is that right?
Yes, she's named after my grandmother's nickname. So my grandmother's name was Freda Imogena, so we called her Sue. Because Freda Imogena is hard to say, and in English it sounds awful. Frida Imogen. So,
but easier for you to say for sure. But that it sounds like there should be a song written for Delaney Sue. It maybe already has been, but I look forward to that interview.
I thought it was called a man named Sue. No,
Delaney talks statues. Jimmy Buffett.
So let's so thank you for that. Looking forward to that on Tequila Sunrise. Kevin, what is up next for Digital Transformers?
So I know you said earlier today that we're just released our episode with Alex Jones from AT&T Omnichannel, but in April we're going to have Trust Your Supplier on the show. And if you haven't heard about Trust Your Supplier, it really is revolutionizing the onboarding process for suppliers to some of the world's largest corporations. Companies like IBM, Vodafone, Nokia, Lenovo, JetBlue, Cisco, Aramco, GlaxoSmithKline. They really have information and lifecycle management of information to increase the ability to meet deadlines and goals. And they're leveraging blockchain to really transform the buyer-supplier relationships and improving insights. So that's going to be huge, I believe.
Yeah, looking forward to that. And that's talk about a list of no names there, Kevin. I've never heard. Kidding aside,
small companies.
Fascinating conversation. I look forward to that and sharing that with our community. We're going to wrap just with a couple of quick comments, and then we're going to sign off. A great one here, a serious one from Big Show Bob Bova. If we don't mentor the youth of today, we've got no right to complain about them. Excellent point, Bob. And I'll tell you, Greg and Kevin, as you both know, we're mentored all the time by folks from earlier generations. We've learned so much from a bunch of talented people that are on this live stream right this second behind the scenes, and Amanda, Natalie, and Clay. So that's a great point. Great call out there. On a very serious note, Paula says, Greg, I had a cat that had 6 toes on each foot.
Very serious.
The things you learn. And we've got a new host, Gerg. So looking forward to hearing.
I have made that mistake myself. So don't feel bad, Aaron. I have actually misspelled my own name before. I don't know why spell check even allows that. I was thinking about it.
And one final welcome, and hopefully we got to most of the first timers, so to speak, but Stephen Haney, which clearly has got a ton of professional certifications. Welcome to today's live stream. Look forward to you participating in future conversations. Okay, too much fun today. Greg and Kevin, always a pleasure.
Let's do it again.
What's that?
Start over again. Let's do it again.
Yeah. Just to be clear, I'm already late for a partner meeting for Kubera, but I let Balaji know that I was going to be late. I have a feeling he's watching just to prove that I'm not just using it as an excuse to be late to the meeting. Yeah.
Well, because of that, we should make sure, hey, check out Kubera Venture Capital, our friends at Balaji, who's going to be on the upcoming Take Your Shot live stream via Tequila Sunrise. So April
28th.
Oh, you want
after that, we're doing it April 28th, and then we're going to be doing that every month. 3 companies get their shot at our judges, and our judges get to shoot back.
So if you're a fan of Shark Tank, this is a supply chain tech version of Shark Tank. And you know, Greg, Kevin, I know is a big fan because I follow him on Twitter, and I see him every Friday night. In fact, Kevin needs to be on Shark Tank. I can see him sitting in the chairs, you and Greg both sitting in the chairs evaluating these pitches. But hey, it's a fun time. You learn a ton, and you see both sides of the coin. So y'all check that out on April 28th. Big thanks to Kevin L. Jackson, host of our Digital Transformers. You can also check out one of his books at Click to Transform. Get that wherever you get your books from.
Oh, we just released a new book called Quick List. So you guys need to check that out. We'll talk more about that later.
Man, Kevin, you never. I'm convinced you don't sleep at night. You just keep.
I haven't written a
producing.
sentence, and you've already written another book.
I'm sorry, but it's about the power of persistence in business and life. I actually just wrote a chapter.
Oh, I did see that.
Yeah, I just wrote a chapter in it, and I collaborated with a good friend of mine out of Italy, Alinka Rakowska. She's a CEO of Leadership Press, and she actually found there was like 30 different leaders in business that talked about how they became successful. So it's a great book.
Excellent. Well, we've already
put better knowing it's only a chapter. How about you, Scott?
Right. Yeah. I get lucky with a couple paragraphs, but our team has already put the link in the comments. Wonderful. Great job there. And congrats on one of your latest projects. And by the way, Stephen Haney, yeah, he's going to fit right in. Says, thanks for the shout out, Scott Lurgio. Yeah, so he's going to fit right in. So thank you for that, Stephen. Well, hey, everybody, it's been a ton of fun on what looks like to be a gorgeous day here in the Metro Atlanta area. Big thanks to, again, the folks behind the scenes, Amanda and Natalie and Clay. Big thanks to all the comments and the perspective and the serious stuff and not so serious stuff. It's important to maintain that sense of humor during challenging times like we're getting through. Big thanks to my co-hosts, Kevin L. Jackson and Greg S. White, the only two. One and only. It's both. Pleasure to do all this with you both. Kevin, look forward to having you back. And on that note, hope everybody has a home run week. Go out there and have the most productive week you've ever had. And we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And we'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody.
All right.